Welcome to the Holistic Success Show. I'm Dr. Robert Puff.
And I'm Elizabeth Lozano.
Today our first guest will be talking about eating disorders and how you can treat them.
We're going to be watching some clips from Dr. Puff about how to live in the present moment.
And then we're going to have a question from you about why awareness is so important.
And then there's also another question about what to do when somebody you love is abusing themselves with drugs. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Today I'd like to talk about meditation and how meditation can really help you and I live in the present moment, in the here and now, and live a very peaceful, tranquil, happy, even blissful life. And how that works is meditation is a way of quieting the mind. When you meditate, you have your eyes closed, you breathe slowly and deeply, and in that process your mind becomes quieter and more still. And in that stillness, what you'll find is when your mind gets still, a natural peace just arises. It's just there. It's a very blissful, very peaceful place inside of you. And anyone who's meditated for a while really will nod their heads and say, yeah, I know what he's talking about. That's why people that meditate and have meditated for a while are very, if you want to almost say, they're very much into it. They're very almost like addicted, but not really. I mean, there isn't an addiction, but you're finding it a very wonderful place to go. Well, I want to talk about taking it to the next stage, because I've met people that have meditated for decades, but their lives are still fairly crazy except when they meditate. So basically they meditate, very peaceful experience, and they go through their busy day. They meditate, very peaceful, and then they go through their busy day. But you really can take that peacefulness into your present moment right here, right now, all day long. It is difficult to do, but it's not impossible. And let me talk about how you do that. The way they do that is it's really going through life in the same way as you go through meditation. When you meditate, you're focusing on your breath. Instead of focusing on your breath, you focus on that which is around you, and one thing at a time. So if you're with, someone you care for, you're totally present with them. If you're working on a project at work, you're totally working on that project. If you're playing with your dog in the backyard, you're just playing with your dog in the backyard, without saying good or bad commentary. I call it egoic commentary, which typically goes on our brain all day long. But when you 100% focus and be present with what's happening right here, right now, not wishing it was different, not wishing you could change it, not wanting more of something else, not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past, but just being 100% present in the here and now, what you'll find is what you have in meditation, it can be the exact same experience you have in your waking state. I call it, when you're wide awake, you can actually feel in a very meditative place, even while you're going through your activities, even if your activity is intense. Because if you lose that egoic talk, your whole body just gets calmer, more relaxed, and more peaceful. So where it can ultimately lead you is, instead of meditating and living your life, you may have a meditative life. And there are people that are doing that around the world. It is it's probably the most difficult thing we can do, but it's a possibility for anyone. And if you just do that 5% rule I often talk about, just do 5% of a day, where throughout the day, there are times where you're 100% present, living in the now, without thoughts, and just doing the activity without thoughts, good or bad, you'll find that you will have a beautiful, wonderful life, and that will increase. And the same experiences that you can have in meditation, you can have throughout the day. And when my teacher taught me how to do that, it was one of the most greatest gifts ever given to me. And I want to pass that on to you, because I care about you guys too. And take a little time. Again, it's not a difficult thing to do. It's just hard to do because we're so used to judging. Lose the judgment, live in the now, and find peace.
This week's first question is from Allie D. in Houston, Texas. And she asks, why is awareness so important, and what does it really mean?
Allie, awareness is probably the most important concept that we can teach you, I believe, because awareness is the pivotal key to change. And what I mean by that is, if we're going to change, we can't change something unless we're aware of it. And it would probably shock you how much each of us aren't really aware of what's going on in our life. We go through life very unaware. And if I can use an very simple example to prove my point. If you drive back and forth somewhere every day, dropping your kids off to school, going to work, and if someone went along with you and they pointed out things along the way, there'd be things you would see all the time, you were seeing every day, that you would just completely not be aware of, not noticing. Because your mind, what it does, your mind shuts down in the sense it gets overwhelmed by life. So what it does is it kind of shuts down and focuses on kind of the routine. So we get in a routine, and then what that routine is, if it's good, it's not so bad. I mean, if your life's going well, because this show is about success, being holistically successful. If your life's going well, awesome. But what happens is there are things in your life that may not be going well, or in all our lives that may not be going well. And the only way you can really change that is, first, you have to be aware of what's going on. And with that awareness, once you have the awareness, then you can begin to change. But without that awareness, you cannot change. So why awareness is so important is, with awareness, you begin to understand who you are and how you interact with the world. And once you have that awareness, you can say, which of these things do I like? Like, am I spending enough time with my children? Am I exercising enough? Am I coming home and having a glass of wine every day to get through the day? And is that a problem? Or are there things in your life you say, I want to do more of? I really enjoy, going on dates with my spouse. I really enjoy watching sunsets. And because of that awareness, you start creating things in your life to help you make those changes. But most of us go through life pretty blinded. We really are unaware of what's happening internally and even externally. We're pretty much like creatures of conditioning. We get conditioned to a certain way, and once we get that conditioning in, and the longer we've lived, it's just a habit. It's a habit. It can be a good habit or a bad habit, but it's a habit. And with awareness comes change. Because when you're aware of something, you can change it. But if you're not aware of it, you will not change it.
A great example of this can be seen in, let's say that you find yourself drinking sometimes, and maybe that's, you notice that, like, wow, I'm kind of drinking a lot. First of all, that's awareness that you've noticed that you're drinking a lot. But the second part is being aware of what is triggering me to drink. I noticed that, lately I've been drinking more than before. What is that about? And I think that takes some soul searching to really look at what is going on in my life. Or, perhaps I'm yelling at my spouse or whatever's going on. Sometimes we're not even aware of what just triggered us. It might be, okay, yeah, you left this pot over here or that glass over here, and you think that you're genuinely upset about that, but I guarantee you it's probably about something else. And that having awareness about that, about what the bigger picture is, really helps you to heal, and it helps because it helps you to deal with what's really going on in your life. So it's an excellent question. And, I think that we cannot create change, like Dr. Puff said, unless we are aware that we're doing something, unless we're aware that there's a problem, unless we're aware that it's triggering, something in us, or what that trigger is. So it's kind of knowing and recognizing what's going on in your life. So, and like he said, so many times we think that we've got it, but there's so much that we miss. I know myself, I've been driving on the freeway before, and I went to Cal State Long Beach for my undergraduate studies, and I used to drive the same road every day. Just so tired after a long day of school. And, there had been times literally where I'm paying more attention. I'm looking around. I'm like, am I on the right freeway? I mean, where am I? Just because, I literally had not paid so much attention to what was going on. And I think what happened was, on that day where I was like that, I was stress-free. I was paying attention more about the present moment, what was going on around me. It was kind of funny. So, I encourage you to notice the same thing. Notice the trees around you. Notice sometimes there's artwork on the side of the freeway, which is, it could be dangerous, I guess. I don't know. So, but thank you so much for your question.
And remember too, with awareness, you will begin to really see a lot more in your life, a lot of beautiful things that you've been missing. And if you use the awareness to really be in touch with what's happening inside of you and outside of you, your life will transform. And in many ways, like a lotus flower, like we have on the image of our show, you come out of the water and this beautiful flower comes out. And you'll be like that through awareness. Transform and grow through awareness. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Dr. Sari Shepphird to the show. She's a clinical psychologist with a private practice in Los Angeles, California. She's the author of the book 100 Questions and Answers about Anorexia Nervosa, and she's here today to talk to us about eating patterns and how they're connected with, our emotional and stress levels, and just to kind of explore a little bit more with us. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Elizabeth. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, what do you think leads to our society being so unhealthy with the way that they eat, whether it's overeating, undereating, whatever it may be?
Well, our society is weight obsessed, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
It is, and it seems like more and more the ideal body type is becoming thinner and thinner as time goes by. And so we know that unhealthy diet behaviors are now commonplace in our culture. And about 80% of women report that they're unsatisfied with their body image. And about 75% of women report that they do engage in some form of unhealthy diet behaviors. So because of the ubiquitous presence of thin models that we sometimes see in the media, we frequently see, because of the obsession that we have now with thinness and with dieting in our culture, many times dieting can lead to unhealthy behaviors that in turn can become an eating disorder.
And I think it's so important to note, I actually used to be friends with somebody who was a photographer for, I'm not going to mention the name, but very, very famous clothing line. And all of the pictures, the women are really tiny. And he was telling me that when they take the pictures and they do the airbrushing and stuff afterwards, they shave off certain areas of their body. Sometimes they'll add weight because sometimes the models are really, really thin. But either way, they're adjusting them, they're adjusting the colors, they're adjusting, there's a little bit of a tummy there, they make that disappear. And it almost leads to a picture of what a woman, we think that we're supposed to look like, when in reality, there's nobody that actually looks like that.
That's right. And we know that celebrities sometimes go through $100,000 makeovers just to be featured in a magazine. And then the photos that are taken for those magazines are in turn airbrushed, as you mentioned, sometimes spending tens of thousands of dollars just to airbrush one image for a magazine.
And, what about the fact that, we talk about a lot on the show about, maybe negative coping skills that people use. And it can go, the one way that we talked about with wanting to lose weight, of course, and not that anybody wants to gain weight, although there are some, I'm sure. But, our society, there's a lot of people in this culture that are very obese and overweight. And, even talking about that with the unhealthy eating habits, but how much do stress and emotion kind of tie in with these eating disorders?
That's a great question, because stress really does play a big role in emotional eating. Whether it's depression or anxiety, trauma, people often turn to food for comfort. It's one of the things now that's become socially acceptable for us as a culture to use when we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And emotional eating can often be a precursor to a more severe clinical eating disorder.
So we talk a lot about awareness on this show, and I think, unfortunately, some people might not be aware of their eating habits. So what do you think is a healthy eating habit or pattern for either a male or a woman, regardless of their body type?
That's a great question, because healthy eating is really flexible eating. Healthy eating involves allowing yourself to choose a wide variety of food options and being comfortable with selecting different foods rather than restricting the foods that you eat, or feeling like there's good foods and bad foods and dividing those foods into categories, only allowing yourself perhaps diet foods or what seem like healthy foods, but at the same time restricting your diet. Restricting your diet is not a healthy approach to eating, but flexibility is.
We've had so many other guests on here also talking about the nutrients that are in food and stuff too, and I would imagine that a lot of those diet foods that are out there aren't exactly healthy for your body. You're not getting all the nutrients and everything that you need, correct?
That's correct. And also people assume that something that is fat-free is good for you because it doesn't have fat. Well, there's two things wrong with that statement. First of all, fat is actually good for your body. It's very important for your organs, for brain functioning. And secondly, many things that are fat-free have a lot of calories or a lot of sugar and aren't necessarily good for you.
Being that you specialize with people with eating disorders and working with that population, how does somebody get to the point where they have an eating disorder, and then how does one recover from such eating disorder?
Okay, well, eating disorders have a variety of causes. It's multifactorial in terms of causation. And so we know that there's genetic components, biological components, as well as social, psychological, and cultural components. Oftentimes we know that people with eating issues have stress or trauma or anxiety or depression in their lives. I'm thinking of a particular woman who I've recently seen who came to me because she was really stressed about her work, she was stressed about her relationships, and she wasn't coping in a healthy way, and instead she was eating more calories than she preferred to have eaten. And because of that, because of the weight gain that resulted, she turned to excessive exercise and laxative abuse in order to try to regulate her weight. So we talked about other ways of coping, healthy ways of dealing with stress and anxiety, also working on her body image because she had a particular sense that she needed to fit into this sort of perfect mold that women often feel that they need to fit into, women and men today. And so we talked about healthy body image, how you can cope with stress and anxiety in a different way other than turning to food.
Now, I have often, in working with this and seeing this, it almost seems like an addiction, like any other, because it's, you're stressed out and you're using something that helps cope, and it's almost it's like an unconscious level that you don't even realize that this is helping you cope with something. So would you agree with that?
Well, in a way I do. I think that habits can seem like addictions, and when people turn to food or when they turn to diet behaviors or unhealthy diet behaviors, they can become so habitual that it feels like an addiction. They don't know of any other way to do their food behaviors or to approach food. However, food and other substances are different in that tolerance and withdrawal don't really enter into the picture when you're talking about food.
Maybe the emotional aspect, the emotional addiction, I guess, to dealing with the stress and, all of that stuff, I guess, is kind of my question.
Certainly, yeah. Coping and turning to food in terms of it being a habit that's unhealthy does sort of parallel what we see in many other addictions.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, in working with somebody who has this problem, how, you talked about with your client, how you were able to kind of help her to recognize those things. What are some of the things that you work on to help connect somebody with their emotions or become aware of that there's a problem and what the problem is?
Well, distress tolerance is very important as well
What is distress tolerance?
Distress tolerance is learning how to deal with unhealthy emotions or difficult emotions, emotions that cause distress, emotions that cause discomfort, and learning ways of dealing with the discomfort that comes from extreme emotions, dealing with those emotions in a healthier way. So it's kind of like anxiety management, but distress tolerance covers a wider range of emotions.
Okay. So many of our viewers out there have children, and I know that, they would love to prevent anything like this ever happening to any of their children. And unfortunately, many of us know somebody who has an eating disorder of one type or another. And I know you specifically, you wrote this book about anorexia and nervosa. How can somebody go about preventing an eating disorder, especially anorexia?
Prevention is such an important topic, and I know that many moms worry about whether they should be feeding their kids certain kinds of food because it might cause weight gain. However, many parents are also worried that if they don't feed their kids enough, it might lead to body image distortion or body image issues or an eating disorder. So prevention is an important question. And so what I tell parents is to have a very flexible approach in the home when it comes to food, a very balanced approach when it comes to dealing with emotions like stress and anxiety, very open communication in the home. Because what we do know is that certain skills that help with resilience, such as confidence and self-esteem and open communication, actually do serve to prevent eating disorders and other mental health issues. So if you want to raise your kids in a healthy and balanced way, I think just a healthy approach to relationships, a healthy approach to food, and encouraging a wide variety of acceptance when it comes to body types, not encouraging just slenderness, but encouraging good health.
And don't you think, too, what they model for their kids is so important? If they're obsessed about food or, even, I know people sometimes will use food as a reward. If you connect those two all the time, there's going to be an issue there eventually, right? And then what do you also think about, the role that media plays? If you've got a young girl or even a young boy that, they're watching all this stuff or seeing these magazines about being thin and having this ideal body, whatever that is, how much do you think that affects, influencing somebody to have an eating disorder?
Very important points, because eating disorders do tend to run in families and have a strong genetic component. So when parents have eating issues themselves, it is more likely that kids will have those issues. And parents can do a lot to encourage viewing different types of media in the home. So not necessarily having a lot of fashion magazines that feature very slim models in the home, or watching certain tween celebrities who are very slender and who talk a lot about their bodies and dieting, but encouraging a wide variety of media in the home so that kids get an understanding that health comes in all shapes and sizes.
So I know that, the media can have such a strong effect. Even myself, I tend to not look at those magazines with all the models and stuff on them because it has a tendency to even make me feel like not that good about my body. And I don't really need to feel that way because I'm fit, I take care of myself and all of those things. So if I don't look at it, I don't feel that way. Wouldn't you say that ties into all of this as well?
It really does. You're not alone, because studies show that when girls look at fashion magazines, they do tend to feel worse about their bodies. And we know that when someone feels worse about their body image, that is a precursor oftentimes to eating disorders. So throwing away the fashion magazines can actually be a healthy step. Other people also choose to throw away their scale because when they weigh themselves on a daily basis, they tend to be more focused on that number, when health isn't necessarily associated with a particular weight or a particular number. So it's not a bad idea to throw away those magazines or even the scale.
You've got some great tips, and I know you've got some more great tips in this book. So how can somebody get a hold of you or your wonderful book?
Well, they can go to my website, which is at helpforeatingdisorders.info, not .com, but .info. And they can find the book at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Borders, and also at my website.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Today we're talking about how to live a meditative life. I want to share with you something that may really help you to live that life, a very peaceful, present awareness life. And it's a very simple technique, but it's something that if you can remember it throughout your day, it will really help you quiet your mind, be present, and be in the now. And what it is you ask yourself this question. When a thought arises in the mind, which they spontaneously arise, and they do all day long, when that thought arises, ask yourself this question. Is there something I can do about this right now? Let me repeat that. Is there something I can do about this right now? And if there isn't something you can do about it right now, let it go. Just let it go and get back to being present with what is. Because what most of us do, and we're conditioned to do, our ego is really conditioned us to do, a thought arises, and even though we can't do anything about it, we just kind of work on it and twist it and work it around and think, well, if I think about it a lot, maybe I'll solve it. And you won't, almost never do we. And you may waste, 8 hours a day doing that. It would shock you how much time, once you become aware of how much the mind just perseverates on the same thing over and over again for days, weeks, months, often in some people's lives, years, and it doesn't go anywhere. It's sad, but I have this experience because I've lived now a little while. I'll go back. I live in California, but I grew up in Iowa, and I'll go back and visit people periodically, and sometimes, people I haven't seen for like 10, 20 years. And I have a good memory. I tend to remember people's experiences, and I'll meet with them 10 years later. And literally, the struggles they were having 10 years ago, 20 years ago, is the exact same thing happening to them now. And it's like they're just stuck in this tape that's just going over and over and over again. And again, we do have things that don't go away sometimes. That is true. But if you really ask yourself, is there something I can do about this right now? And sometimes we do need to be attentive to ideas. We have to think about where we're going to go to college. Do we want to spend my life with this person? Where we want to go on vacation? I need to solve this project at work. But when most of our life is far more fluid, it just flows. You can just be present with things. You can just enjoy life as you go along. And your tasks, most of the tasks we do, it's like driving. Once you learn to drive, you know how to drive. You don't have to think about driving anymore. And I think what most of us do, we think we have to think about, am I driving well? Am I driving good? Am I driving badly? And so what happens is there's just so much egoic interface going on that it really keeps you from being relaxed. And that's all that tension builds up. But if you use this technique, again, what it is ask yourself, is there something I can do about this right now? And if there isn't, witness that thought that's arisen, and then get back to what's happening right here, right now. Right here, right now, you and I are having a conversation. A one-way conversation, but we're having a conversation. So be present with me, and then when the show's over, go to your next thing and be present with that. And then go to your next thing and be present with that. And if you do that hour after hour, week after week, year after year, that culminates in a beautiful life. In a very life you're going to really say, wow, I don't have to wait someday to be happy. I can be happy right here, right now, and lose all the struggle I have inside of me, because that struggle will really wear you out. So lose the struggle, be present in the now, and find the peace that truly passes all understanding. Peace.
Our second question comes to us from Sarah T. in Topeka, Kansas, and she writes in, my brother is heavily into drugs, but it's difficult for me to confront him or to tell my parents because I don't want to get him into trouble. What is the best option? I love my brother, but I don't want to see him hurt himself any longer. Any advice?
Well, first, Sarah, I'm sorry for your brother. I know that you love him, and it must be very painful for you to see him using drugs. And I guess the question I want to ask you is, why is your brother using drugs? And I'm going to answer it if I may. We use drugs or any form of addiction because we have pain inside of us. So your brother is in pain. He's not trying to hurt people. He's actually just trying to cover up his pain. He's suffering. It's like if you have a cut, you shoot Novocaine into it so you don't feel it. Drugs really do the same thing, except they're not covering up physical pain. They're covering up emotional pain. And because you love him and you live in his world, you have the same parents, you may have some insights into why he is suffering and what's going on in his life. And I think starting there, just saying, hey, brother, I really care for you, and I'm aware that this is going on, and I'm not going to tell on you, but what's happening with you, what's going on, and talk to him about it in a very loving way. And he might open up. He might say, well, I'm really mad at mom, or I'm upset with my girlfriend. There may be something going on there, and just helping him get in touch with his feelings. That may not work though. So another thing you may suggest is that for the family, maybe go to your parents and not say, my brother's doing drugs, but we have a crisis here. Your son is struggling, my brother's struggling, and I think we should get some counseling. What do you think of that? Or you could go to the school counselor and say, hey, can me and my brother meet with you as a way to just get some help? And having a third party there helping you navigate that course of why he's doing that would be helpful, because he may not know what to do. I mean, he may just need to be able to fit in with his friends because of the drugs. So there could be a lot of reasons why he's using. But approaching it in a loving but caring way will really be helpful. I mean, he does need to stop using drugs because they're very destructive. But I think starting with that loving approach is a great way to start. And I'm sure Elizabeth will have some other ideas.
And I think it's important to note that, I know you're concerned about your brother getting into trouble, but your brother is in trouble. He's in a very great deal of trouble. And, depending on what the drug is that he's using, a lot of drugs, if we take them to the extreme, it's something that we could eventually die from. So it is a very serious matter. And, I want to encourage you to get help with also the fact that your brother is using drugs, and how does that affect you? Because I'm sure it affects you tremendously. And maybe you can get some help on your own. It sounds like you probably are, over the age of 12. And actually at a certain point you can get therapy on your own if there's something very serious going on in your life. And for you to write such a sophisticated question, I'm imagining that you are, probably over 16, 17. And I encourage you to go and get help and find out what's the best way to deal with this, because I want you to know that you can't solve all these problems for your brother. Your brother needs to get help to deal with what's going on, and it is a family thing that needs to come together. But you have to understand there's a word called being codependent, and codependent is trying to help and rescue somebody else that you love, and you can get really sick and really dragged down by that. And I really want to encourage you to take care of yourself in that, but know that your brother does need help. And if it comes down to it and you need to tell your parents because you're worried about him, I encourage you to do that. But I encourage you to try the route that Dr. Puff has mentioned to you, because I think that each of those avenues could be really beneficial for you. And I'm really sorry to hear that you and your family are struggling, and I wish you the best of luck.
And your love for your brother will make a difference. So love him and watch him change.
Our quote this week is by Paul Brunton. Outwardly, one's life may suffer every kind of limitation, from bodily paralysis to miserable surroundings, but inwardly, it is free in meditation to reach out to a sphere of light, beauty, truth, love, and power. I think what we are trying to teach you here on the show is the benefits of meditation and how you can find so much joy and peace in your life no matter what is going on. So I encourage you to try it and enjoy your life. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Holistic Success Show. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our website so that way you can get emails about the upcoming shows that we've got, as well as all the other wonderful things we're doing. You can also get a 10% discount on anything you buy in the bookstore. And also, please don't forget to send us your questions so we can answer them and have you involved in the show.
And as you know, we have a wonderful audience, you watching us. And if you have a company that would like to reach out to this audience and teach them about your product that you have, we'd love to have you be a sponsor of our show.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you next time.